precise. Dilated people, so you better build twice.
Act like you know, not now, but right now.
Violated people, yeah. I go through rivers, so I don't need a sink. I travel both directions, believe one set of prints. It's just a little trick of the indigenous.
Hello everybody and welcome to the Ace MMA YouTube channel. My name is Dominic Lanzetta and welcome to the channel if you're new. If not, this is going to be a little bit more of a personal vlog. I've been meaning to do this one. I didn't have the time. I wanted to try and do it alone if I had the opportunity. This is a little bit more personal. This is kind of what I wanted to go into is why I got into martial arts. And the reason that I love this sport and this culture and why I've kind of dedicated a large portion of my life to it. So, let's take it back to the beginning. I always was doing sports as a kid. I started out playing baseball when I was probably like 5 years old. Maybe a little bit older than that, maybe 8. 5 might be a bit young. I don't know. But no, I was always playing sports. I did a whole bunch of stuff when I was a kid. I played baseball. I fenced for a little while. Let's see, what else? I tried a little bit of everything when I was younger. But baseball was like my main sport for a long time. Then when I got to be about 12, I think, I started playing football. And football played a huge part in my life until I graduated high school. So I was playing football for like 6 years. So anyway, I was like really into it. You know, I was a running back. Well, wasn't running back yet. When I first started, I was playing tight end, I think. Tight end. We were pee-wee, so I'm too small. For those of you who don't know or can't gauge my size, I'm not a big guy. I fight around like 125, between 125 and 140. Well, yeah, 140 is the heaviest I've ever fought at. So like, and I'm like 5'4" on a good day. But yeah, we were little, so I was playing like corner and tight end when I first started, and then eventually I was, running back, linebacker when I was older. But I was around 12 years old, and I asked my coach for Pop Warner football. I was like, hey, I want to make sure I stay in shape in the off season because I want to get better. What's something you would recommend for me to do? I'm always, looking forward to get better, and that's always been my thing. I've always tried to work harder to get better. And he said, try wrestling. Wrestling is what I used to do when I was playing football, so try that. So I was like, wrestling, huh? I never done wrestling before. I've had done some martial art. Well, like the fencing was like really the only martial art I had done at that point. Before that, I tried karate when I was super young. I was really into it. Really into like the idea of karate. I watched a lot of like Dragon Ball Z, and I was into comic books, so I always wanted to learn how to fight. And I remember I went in to a studio. I forget even where the studio was, but I just remember really clearly. I was really young. We were in a class of a bunch of kids, and we were learning how to kick. And the instructors, I don't really remember the instructors like sort of telling me how to kick. They just gave the kids pads, and were like, get at it, which is like, ooh, I would never do that with my kids. I don't trust, well, my young kids anyway. I don't trust them enough, the ones I teach anyway. But, so I remember I kicked the pad, and when I was little, I was like really, like, I guess sensitive is a good way to put it. Not like, well, emotionally a little bit, but also like just not used to getting banged around or anything. So I hit this pad and I hit it completely wrong. I hit it with my toe first, which you shouldn't, well, I mean, yeah, which is just not good unless you're conditioned to do that. So I kick it, and I just remember I like grabbed my foot and I was like playing it up a lot. I was like, ow, 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 ow. I like disrupted the whole class, and I was like, I hurt my foot, ah, typical like 4-year-old type stuff. And I just remember the instructor pulled me aside and brought me up to my parents, and it was just like, we're not sure if this is right for him. And that kind of always stuck with me. And I didn't really realize that until I really examined how much I wanted to do martial arts, like how much that stuck with me as a kid. But anyway, that was back to the point. So when I was about 12 years old, I decided to do wrestling in the off season for football to stay in shape. And wrestling, for those of you who have never done high school, middle school wrestling, it's tough. It is a hard sport. It's really taxing physically and taxing mentally. Like you're trying to make weight every week. You're competing every week, pretty much every other week. There's a lot that goes into it. And I grew up in Pennsylvania, and that's kind of a big thing. In like Pennsylvania, wrestling is a big thing. I grew up north of Philadelphia, by like southern Jersey, closer to Trenton. So that division, like the divisions for wrestling there, wrestling was competitive. It wasn't like there's certain parts of the state and certain parts of that area where wrestling is super competitive. But it was tough. And I had asthma and all this stuff, but I really enjoyed wrestling because I struggled with it. In fact, I really didn't get good at wrestling until I was out of high school, which is hysterical because that was when I was done competing in wrestling. But anyway, I did it in the off season for football, and I was doing it, and I was this is all right. And then I remember I was flipping through the channels one day after practice. I was home, I finished up my homework, and I was just flipping through the channels on my TV, and I saw one of my first ever UFC fights. I think it was on Spike TV because it was still on Spike TV at the time. It was Randy Couture versus Tim Sylvia. And they were talking, I just remember the commentary talking about how Randy was a Greco-Roman Olympic alternate, and he was high-level wrestler. And I was wrestling? I never really equated wrestling as a martial art until that point. Because I saw, I was able to identify the stuff that Randy was doing in that fight. I saw him, doing these takedowns and doing all these, hand fighting and all this stuff that I had been doing in my wrestling practices in middle school. And I was wow, you can actually, that's super interesting that it's a martial art and it works in fights. And from there, I kind of got addicted. I kept watching the sport, and I was, really interested, and I was trying to learn everything just from watching and looking at it. And I was I really want to, this seems really cool. And I wanted to do it. And I remember I'd been looking around for a bit to start to try boxing, start to try MMA. And there wasn't a ton of stuff around me at the time. MMA was still kind of in its infancy at that point. It was mid 2000s, so there wasn't a ton yet. But I found a little boxing gym not far by me, and I started training boxing when I was about 15 years old. Boxing, a little bit of kickboxing. And then I was even searching through the web, through the internet to kind of learn, and bought books and all those kinds of things. And I was hooked. And I'm the same way. I'm such an obsessive personality about it. But I was just, in depth, just trying to learn as much as I could, and working. But I never really, I was still working at it, but it never really got to the point where I was interested. I was really interested in it, but I didn't find the deeper meaning in it until I was about 16. So I was 16 and I was dating, I had a girlfriend at the time. It was my first girlfriend, and typical first girlfriend kind of stuff. You fall in love, and you're I don't want to leave this person. I could see myself marrying her, because you're a kid and you're dumb. And no offense to you who you're in your first relationship, but that's how it is. You get so infatuated with that feeling of being accepted and loved that you think this is the end all be all. When 90% of the time it's not. And for me, it most certainly wasn't. I went through a really rough patch with this girl. She was I was 16 years old, and she cheated on me, which affected me a lot mentally. Just when you when you put yourself so wholeheartedly into somebody, which is just my nature, and something like that happens to you when you're young and impressionable, it really affects you. And to this day, there's some stuff that, like, in my current relationships that it still, like, stems from those feelings, and it sucks, honestly. But that point, I got very depressed. Like, really depressed, to the point where I was contemplating terrible things. I was just not in a good space mentally, and I would be up all night. I wasn't able to sleep. I felt depressed. Looking back on it now, it's really funny to me, because at the time it felt like my world was crumbling. But now it's like I was so much better off, in that situation. I was so much better off without that person in my life. But at the time, I was like, oh my God, like, I was heartbroken. I was hurting a lot. Like, to a point that it's really uncomfortable for me to talk about how much I was hurting. But anyway, at the time, my dad had a friend who was Shotokan karate black belt, who would train people out of his garage. Me and, like, a friend from high school and, like, a few older gentlemen, we would go to his garage every once in a while and I would train. And I went one day, and it was probably like a week or so after this breakup happened. And that the day before, I had gone over to her house and confronted her, got all my stuff back from her, and it was like, ugh. Like, the most dramatic thing possible for somebody. It's, like, so stupid, because, like, if somebody had a camera on me, it would have made perfect TV, because it was, like, so stupid. Crying and yelling at each other and stuff like that. And we're, like, 16 years old, so what the hell do we know? But anyway, I was devastated. I was so upset. And, like, again, I was contemplating stuff, and, like, I felt like, my heart got ripped out. So I go there, maybe like a day after this happens, or maybe it was the afternoon of it happening. And I remember I went there, everyone's like, hey, are you okay? Are you feeling alright? And I told them what had been going on. And, they were trying to, make things light and make me feel better. One of the guys was like, hey, you got to at least keep your stuff. I have a wife, I got divorced, she took half of my stuff. And, like, stuff like that, but it didn't really help at the time. And I remember we started sparring, and the instructor who I was sparring with, we were playing music in the background. In fact, huge nerd. The instructor, it's funny, in martial arts you tend to meet a lot of nerds, but he had, like, this little, like, statue of Yoda set up in his little dojo, and all this little, like, memorabilia and stuff. Like, he had, like, a signed poster from Tong Po, from Kickboxer, and all this stuff. But, he was, what was the music that was playing? It was the Ewok, I swear, it was the Ewok song at the end of Return of the Jedi was playing. And he was sparring with me, and my head was so clouded with all these thoughts, these invasive thoughts, and I just remember I was sucking in the sparring session. And, like, no matter what I could do, like, he was just, like, 10 steps ahead of me, and just, like, really just, like, toying with me. And in fact, he started dancing. Like, literally dancing, like, doing, like, the wave and all this stuff, like, while we're fighting. And, like, I just remember he was just, like, having fun with me. And I was frustrated. I was like, what the heck? Like, what can I do? I can't hit this guy. I can't, like, what is going on? And then, like, I took a second break from the sparring, and, like, we were cycling guys in, because there was maybe 4 of us. And I remember I was sitting on the side, and, like, he was dancing in front of me to the music. And, I'd always done, like, expressive stuff. Like, I sang, and I was in musical, so, like, arts and, like, that kind of stuff. And I played an instrument for a bit. And, like, the arts, the idea of, like, artistic expression was something that I was very familiar with. And I was like, maybe there's a bit more to this martial arts stuff besides the physical. Maybe it's emotional. Maybe it's expressive, like dance. It never really dawned on me at that point until right then. And I just remember I was like, in this next sparring session, just let your emotions flow. Like, let all this frustration and anger and sadness kind of just flow through your body and express yourself with your movement, with your sparring, with your martial art. with your art, express yourself. And I did, and I just remember, like, I don't remember much of the sparring session, but I remember it was so, like, it was just so liberating for me. Because I had no outlet for these emotions. I was keeping it all bottled inside. And I just wanted to explode, and I would cry, and all this, like, and I was angry and upset. And I was just bottling it in. I had no real release for it. I had no one to talk to. I know when I really wanted to talk to about it, because I didn't feel like anybody would understand. And I just let myself go in the sparring session. And it was the most liberating thing emotionally for me. So at that point, I realized that there was more to martial arts than just learning the techniques. And it's important to know how to defend yourself and all this stuff. But for me, that's part of it. For the main thing that always got me was that it was about artistic expression. Even like when I compete and I fight and I hop into a ring, it's not about hurting the other person across from me. I mean, obviously it's an inescapable fact that in order for me to do well in this thing, I have to, interact with somebody in that way. But for me, it's always about showing myself. It's not about hurting the other person. It is my tool for expression. I always tell people that for me, martial arts, like the sparring arena or, wherever I happen to be, the ring rather, that is my canvas. And all my movements and all of like my technique, they're the strokes of my paintbrush. And I'm expressing myself. That's like, and it's the way I can find myself to be the truest, like express myself in the truest form that I know how. Because like I used to draw and like I said, I sang and I danced and I did all this stuff, but like nothing feels as liberating to me as that. I mean, it's expression, but at the same time, it's this problem solving when you get to the higher levels and stuff. That's what always excited me. That's what really got me passionate about this. And when I just figured that out, there was no turning back. From there on out, my obsession grew. When I was about 18, I started training, formally training Muay Thai and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, Commando Krav Maga, Combat Submission Wrestling, Jeet Kune Do. Luckily, I had an instructor who was certified to teach all this, and I was able to cross-train a lot in different arts, and it was super cool, and it was exactly what I needed at the time, is to expose myself to kind of everything that I loved, and really delve into it. And then I started teaching. I got really invested in that, and then, at that point I went to college. I was 18, and then I went to college, but I still wanted to keep doing it, so I got together with the martial arts club at my school, which wasn't really a martial arts club, it was like a Taekwondo club. So I ended up getting my black belt in Taekwondo through that club. And I became the president of that club, and I started teaching classes and running it as an organization. And through all that, and then after that, eventually, moving to the DC area and working here, I found Capital MMA and started to train here, and then started to compete here because I wanted to compete, but school was what I focused on. And yeah, that's kind of just how it all happened. And even here, I started out, this was always a passion thing for me. I started out cleaning the mats here because I didn't really have a means to pay. I started out cleaning the mats every night, and then eventually I got to the point where I would teach, and my teaching grew and grew and grew, and now I'm the head children's instructor here. I run the whole program. I teach all of the children's Muay Thai classes, and then I'm an assistant Muay Thai instructor as well, and I assist with the wrestling classes for the adults, and I'm one of the head coaches here in terms of cornering fighters, and I fight as well, and it's kind of blossomed into this. So my main takeaway from the martial arts, like why I love it is a way to just kind of show people who you are. And it really opens you up, and it opens you up to expression, and it's an environment where you can really be yourself. I mean, when you come to a martial arts, everybody's intimidated when they first come into a martial arts gym. Martial artists in general, those who, it's very rare, in my experience at least, that you meet, meatheads in martial arts. People are always afraid that you will. Those people don't last very long. They get humbled really quickly. The people who you most likely interact with are, people who fell in love with it. People who are just down to earth, maybe a little bit shy. You do see, the shy people come in more often than not, who are shy and they're just learning, but they are passionate about it. And that's what's awesome about this community, is that they are, the people who stick around in the martial arts community are passionate and lovely people. And there's nothing better than that. And that's why I went on this martial arts journey, and that's why I fell in love with this sport. And that's why I continue to do it. Thank you guys for listening. I know that was a little bit heavy, but I really appreciate it. And hopefully my story inspires you guys, if you're not already inspired, or you're not already training. And if you are training, I want you guys to maybe leave a comment and to kind of explain how you got into martial arts and what inspired you. But yeah, I had a lot of inspiration and stuff, but I'll get into that another day in terms of other sources of media. I hinted at it a little bit, but anyway, thank you guys so much for listening to my story, and I'll see you next time. This has been Dominic Lanzetta with Ace MMA, and I'll talk to you guys later. Peace. Thank you all for joining me for this long look into why I started martial arts in the first place, and I hope you all can forgive the audio discrepancies. Anyway, thank you all for showing up, and I hope to see you again in the next video. Party on, and peace out.